but it's well known that the John Wick series has excellent action sequences and great fight choreography. So the question going into this was, without the Keanu Reeves charisma and physicality, will it work? And I can give a rousing kinda. Welcome back to The Rank. I'm John, and today we're going to be ranking Ballerina, or the official title, From the World of John Wick, Ballerina, starring Ana de Armas, written by Shay Hatton and directed by Len Wiseman. If you're enjoying these rankings or just like the idea of getting a review of an action movie based on it being an action movie, please consider subscribing and or following, liking, and reviewing. And please put any of your questions, comments, or suggestions into the comments or email the show. And if you super duper like it, consider becoming a patron at patreon.com/TheRankPodcast, where you can get access to all of our archived episodes. Now, let's get started with the potent notables. Quickly, before I get into it, I want to say that I will refrain from any spoilers, but in case I make a mistake, spoiler alert, I guess. I'm going to really attempt not to. Let's go to the potent notables. So as always, we start the potent notables with the movie's financials. It came out this past weekend. So for its first weekend, it garnered $24.5 million domestically and $26 million internationally, for a worldwide total of $50.5 million. And this is against a budget of $90 million. So don't know if it's going to make its money back. We might not see Ana de Armas in a sequel. We'll see. The film actually takes place between chapters 3 and 4 of the John Wick series. Now, the original release date was June 7th, 2024. So in order to film more action sequences, the date was pushed to June 6th, 2025. Now, there was a story that went out about this that said that Chad Stahelski did the reshoots and that he reshot most of the film because he disapproved of Len Wiseman's original cut, and that the reshoots took place in Prague for 2 to 3 months without Wiseman's involvement. Now, according to Chad, this was just additional photography, and he and Wiseman were both upset about the rumors. Wiseman said, quote, "We," as in him and Stahelski, "we're both frustrated about it. It's a really frustrating thing to hear such claims, and it happens more today than it did back in the day. There was additional shooting because the studio loved the movie. We had to take out some scenes from the script originally because we just didn't have the resources or the schedule. Lionsgate then really believed in the early cut of the movie after we put it together, so it was an exciting opportunity to go back and add more to the film. But when the press hears about that and the reports become whatever they are, it always has a negative connotation. But I'm just so glad that we were able to go back," end quote. Of course, it was The Wrap that reported this in October 2024 about the reshoots and potential issues between Stahelski and Wiseman. But anyway, they reported that Stahelski was more or less ghost directing the film during reshoots instead of helping Wiseman. As earlier official reports mentioned, based on what multiple sources said, Wiseman wasn't even brought back on set while they were filming reshoots in Prague, and Stahelski directed all the reshoots himself, which lasted for 3 months. This also ended up causing issues with Stahelski's Highlander reboot starring Henry Cavill. It was delayed, and the development on it had to be pushed back for 5 months due to all the problems with Ballerina and Stahelski's involvement in reshooting and changing what turned out to be most of the film. The delays lasted for so long that Cavill ended up accepting the role in Voltron for Amazon MGM. So since this ended up clearing his schedule enough to do another project. Lionsgate, however, denied this and claimed how Wiseman only left due to some serious health issue, but later returned to work with Stahelski on reshoots, which they said lasted for only 1 month, despite other news reports which all mention actors working on reshoots between March and June of 2024. So who knows the truth, but it was Len Wiseman's first time directing a feature film in 13 years, so maybe he was just rusty? I don't know. Apparently there were a lot of action scenes in the script that didn't make the final cut, including a shower scene that would have ended up in a nude fight scene with Ana de Armas. Also, there was supposed to be a scene where Eve was supposed to infiltrate a cult of retired assassins living in a remote retirement community, which would have ended up with her killing about 200 of these dangerous old fogies. Actually, the original script's body count was 1,400. Of course, it wasn't originally written as a John Wick spinoff, and the lead character's name was Rooney. Still, 1,400, that's quite the body count. It was meant to be sort of satire. Anyway, those are the potent notables. Let's go to the movie overview. So we get the first cinematic spin-off of the John Wick series with this. Now, Zach and I ranked the first John Wick, and we haven't done any of the others yet, but it's well known that the John Wick series has excellent action sequences and great fight choreography. So the question going into this was, without the Keanu Reeves charisma and physicality, will it work? And I can give a rousing kinda. So the fight choreography and the action sequences are top-notch, as you would expect. But I don't know that I bought Ana de Armas's physicality in this, at least not all the time. The movie really wants you to get behind Eve Macaro, Ana de Armas' character, painstakingly so. They're pushing a ton of lore at you and spending a lot of time on origin, too much time. It's interesting because they're so intent on driving home Eve's motivation, but they sort of gloss over the lore of the Ruscaroma and only give hints as to Eve's relationship to it. I assume this is because the Ruscaroma is more broadly talked about in Chapter 3 Parabellum, but I haven't seen that in a long time and I don't remember it well enough to move past it here. I will say they do enough with it that you get the gist, so it's fine. The villain portion of things, though, is entirely undefined. The villain is the head of some tribe or cult, but we don't know their name. I guess they're just named after the town they're in, some Stadt. I never really got that. I also didn't understand their motivation or reason for being. It was just all so ill-defined. They spent so much time establishing Eve's motivation that they seemed to be hoping that we wouldn't care about the villain's motivation. But I spent a good portion of this movie wondering why he, the villain, was doing anything that he was doing. Like, what was the purpose of the cult? Why were they created? What is their ethos? And I felt like the movie was saying back to me, dude, don't you see that she's beating people up with ice skates? Why do you fucking care?
Touché.
And to a certain extent, the movie's right. By and large, though, I was entertained, and what else can you really ask for? The ending, if they had actually let the ending be the ending, was satisfying. Of course, they had to set up the sequel, though I doubt there will be one. Even that blatant bit of commercialism wasn't that bad, more like an eye roll. But let's go to the rank and see how it did.
A rank.
So the rank is where I rank the movie based on 10 categories: story, acting, originality, action sequences, film coherence, hero appeal, villain appeal / hatred, supporting characters appeal, the final showdown, and my rank. I rank it on a scale of 1 to 5, 1 being the worst, 5 being the best, and the first category is story, which I gave a 3.5. The base story is a good one. Kid sees something terrible, grows up being trained to be a fighter, and vows vengeance on the person who committed the terrible act when she was a kid. We get a bunch of world building here that is so obviously trying to set up sequels that it's kind of annoying. You can set up sequels while still telling a complete story. Story's not bad, but not great. Let's go to acting, which I gave a 3. In general, I have liked Ana de Armas in the things that I've seen her in, but she felt a little uneven in this one. She wasn't bad or anything, but she just seemed rather average. And on top of that, and I love him, but Keanu was just not a great actor.
No way.
Everyone else is good, like fine to good. Gabriel Byrne being villainous always works. Originality, I gave a 2.5. So as far as action movie plotting goes, it's just not original at all. It's a spin-off and it stands on its own for the most part, but I do think they're expecting you to have seen other John Wick movies to be fully immersed, which takes points away. So why is it a 2.5 and not lower? Because they were very innovative with their action sequences and the way they killed the bad guys. It felt inventive and creative and worthy of a higher originality score. But I'll get into the action sequences more deeply in the next category, which is action sequences, which I gave a 4.5. The action sequences were excellent, unique, and inventive. They utilize unique weapons and they have a lot of fun with them in the fight choreography. The only detraction on this is that there were times when they were a little too inventive with the choreography. Like, it's neat the way they worked it out, but the psychology of actually doing it makes no sense at all. Also, again, Ana de Armas doesn't have the best physicality for these action sequences. It's not terrible or anything, and I'm not like saying, oh, Ana de Armas is the worst. 4.5 is still a really good score, but that's why it's not a 5. Let's go to the next category, which is film coherence. I gave film coherence a 2.25. It wasn't necessarily poor coherence because the through line of the plot was entirely understandable. However, we spend way too much time on origin here. Her motivation is too clearly defined and could have been handled with short flashbacks instead of the first 40 minutes or more of the movie. We also get the hero's motivation hammered into us, but we get none of the villain's motivation. You're just left to say, well, I guess he's the bad guy because he does bad things, but I'll discuss that more in villain appeal, which is not the next category. The next category is hero appeal, which I gave a 3. I felt sort of ambivalent about Eve. There were definitely a few times where I was like, oh damn, she's a badass. But for the most part, I was just sort of enjoying the sequences more than the character. Like, she could have been anyone and I would be into the action. Still, it's not like Anna has no charisma. She's still charismatic, but there just wasn't a ton there for this one. So let's go to villain appeal / hatred, which I gave a 3.25. It's actually really similar to hero appeal in that it felt a little blah. However, Gabriel Byrne does menacing really well, so that engaged me just the littlest bit more than Eve. So let's go to supporting characters appeal, which I gave a 3.25. John Wick is there, so I'm unwilling to go under this score, but him showing up at all is the only reason this isn't lower. I'm recording this a few days after I watched it, and I can't remember basically any supporting characters except for John Wick and the goon with the manly jawline who participated in one of the coolest action sequences in this movie. Well, I guess it was the hottest action sequence in this movie. Now, if you've seen it, you'll know why I said that. Anyway, yeah, above 3 because of John Wick, and that's about it. So let's go to the final showdown, which I gave a 4. So if the final showdown is just Eve versus Gabriel Byrne's character, then it might be a little lower because there's just not much there, but it's a very satisfying showdown end. If you consider it the final long action sequence, it's probably higher than a 4. So I met it in the middle and went with a 4. So let's go to my rank, which I gave the movie a 3.25. I don't know, maybe my expectations were too high. It wasn't bad or anything, it just felt very generic. It just never got me super into Eve, and because I wasn't actively rooting for her, it was hard to get super invested in the movie. Still though, the action is a lot of fun. So basically what I'm saying is, if you want to go, turn your brain off and just enjoy some cool action sequences, this is the movie for you. So that puts the total for Ballerina at 32.5, which puts it in the tier meh, mediocre. It's actually just below Mission Impossible 2, which I'm shocked by, and just above Jason and the Argonauts. So thanks for listening and or watching. If you'd like to see a list of our action movie rankings, you can do that on our website at therankwithjohnandzach.com. Remember to subscribe, review, and comment, and please consider supporting us on our Patreon site at patreon.com/therankedpodcast, where you can access all the archived episodes. Anyway, it's done. As always, the potent notables start with the movie's financials. Fuck.
Cut!
I didn't rewrite this from Mission Impossible. I'm a fucking moron.
Cut!
Blah, blah, blah.
Cut! Take 3.
Now, according to Chad,
Froze up again.